Water Rescue Awareness Level Platoon Training for 2023. I'm Captain Halverson. I'm going to speak fast to get through this training presentation. This is the prerequisite to multi-company drills that we're going to do at Sugar House Park. This is presented to you by Company 7 and Medic Engine 3 of Sugar House. Objectives: we're going to review hazards of water-related responses, review initial response actions for first two companies in the pre-incident response and arrival phase, and then we're going to demonstrate approaching a stationary victim trapped in water and taking initial rescue actions. So water hazards in Salt Lake City. We have the Jordan River and its surplus canal, approximately 16 miles waterway with depths of up to 18 feet and as wide as 200 feet. The four creeks, Parley's Creek, which is pictured here at 200 cubic feet per second, a small creek that normally flows 35 to 50, can easily surpass 200 cubic feet per second during spring runoff. The same can be said about Immigration Creek, Redview Creek and its reservoir, and City Creek. Our secondary and additional hazards throughout the city, which you'll see occur in just about every district citywide, are the Fairmont Park Pond, at about 24 feet. This is an urban fishery in Sugar House, so it's very deep. Sugar House Park Pond, Liberty Park Pond, Redview Reservoir, various swimming pools, the Warm Springs, golf course ponds, the Regional Athletic Complex Pond, the Lee Cay ponds, various highway retention ponds, and of course the duck clubs. And all of these have been sites of water rescue responses in years past. So the waterways and ponds of Salt Lake City can present surface water, floodwater, swift water, submersion, ice, or mud hazards. And as shown here on inspection of Redview Reservoir, which is a restricted access National Wildlife Research Area, we found signs of trespassing when a hockey rink was discovered in 2022. So folks can always find a way to get themselves into trouble. So water hazards and their rescue disciplines defined. Dive rescue, rescue where victims are submerged. Salt Lake City Fire Department currently does not have a dive rescue program beyond our snorkels and masks and breath holding. However, we are trying to implement that. Flood rescue is the rescue of victims in areas not normally inundated with water, and we want to make a special note here that when we are responding in floodwaters, we must assume that all floodwater is contaminated by chemical pollution of our normal cities, as well as the interaction in discharges and sewers as those waters rise. Ice rescue is the rescue of victims from frozen surfaces, even if surrounded by open water. Mud rescue, people unable to move from saturated soils. Surface water rescue is the rescue of victims from open water with no current, ice, or waves. If there are large waves, we call that surf rescue, and Salt Lake City Fire Department currently does not train in surf rescue. And then, of course, swift water rescue, which is the rescue of victims from water moving faster than 1 knot, or 1.15, or commonly referred to as 1.2 miles per hour. Special note here during our spring runoff, delta P, differential pressures, is the pressure difference or drop of pressure in a piping system with water flowing through it. So one elevation to a lower elevation can create a large vortex and become very dangerous for rescuers when we have clogged trash racks, drains, or grates. So during flooding, the unclogging of a drain can create a deadly pressure differential. So never approach submerged drains, manholes, pipes, or grates, especially attempting to clear them. If there is any water above ankle deep, or we can get ourselves into a deadly scenario. So we do have available on the Collector app on your iPad, please become familiar with this, sort of a living map of our waterways, access points, and special hazards found throughout the city. You can see we have a lot of data points along the Jordan River and its surplus canal, and we're starting to add more and more through the east side. So if you have a special water hazard in your area that you think needs to be added, you can email me or any of the station captains at Company 7, and we'll get that added. Each of these data points is clickable thanks to our friends at GIS, and we'll provide additional information at that location. So some of the useful information that's being demonstrated here can be an image that might pop up, or special access needs like what keys needed to open that gate can be found, and we do update this if needed, so just let us know. But be familiar with your water rescue map on the Collector app. So we're responding to a water rescue dispatch pre-incident. You should know your district's hazards and seasonal conditions. Are we dealing with ice, swift water, surface water, or mud? And plan for events based on those weather patterns. Know your limitations, which come from your training, your PPE, and your equipment. Be familiar with your water rescue map, as well as how to use your Google Maps to help plan for downstream, upstream spotters, to know your area and know where the water flows. So awareness level responders are expected to establish command, secure the scene, and prevent further harm if possible, and to organize appropriate resources, never to enter the hazard. So now we're responding, and we're the first due company. We need to listen to dispatch details, query additional information as you need. And check your iPad resources like Google Maps, like the water rescue map. Try to determine what additional resources you might need to call for when responding. And then you're going to direct crews to arrive downstream as they are responding secondary to you. And you're going to do that as appropriate based on the information you have, the water hazard that you know, and the current flows that you are anticipating based on weather. You're going to make crew assignments, and you're going to mentally review potential tactics. You're going to be ready to make adjustments in those tactics after you've seen size up. And then eventually, we definitely want an upstream spotter as well to let us know if we've got any debris or additional hazards coming downstream to our victim. So on arrival, safety is our primary concern. Again, water is the last ideal H hazard that we have in Salt Lake City, where we would have to hold our breath to survive or fight to breathe. So extremely hazardous, and we all know that drowning is a key concern in our nation and worldwide, really. We lose a lot of people to drowning, so we know that this is a very hazardous situation. So when we do arrive, we're going to establish a strong command and provide a good scene size up. Critical importance is a witness interview. We need to ask the witness who was the victim, how old were they, what was their physical condition, what was their mental state, did they appear to be struggling or cooperative. We need to know a lot about that victim, and if they were alone, were there more people involved, what happened, when did it happen, how did it happen, where did it happen, and that where becomes critical. That's our PLS, or our point last seen, which is critical in the strategy and tactics that we are going to use from that point on. If we do have a point last seen, we're going to ask the witness to point to that spot, and oftentimes hold a point on that spot so that we can reference it. We don't want them to change their mind or lose their PLS. So initially, if available, we're going to provide flotation or some means of stabilization to a victim. We're going to determine our course of action. Is this rescue or recovery? Is this a mass casualty? When it comes to submersion, rescue and recovery, a lot of factors come into play. Environmental factors like the temperature of the water, the condition of the water. If somebody has been submerged, common thinking is 60 minutes. We transition to recovery. We know that a lot of advancements have been made at Primary Children's University of Utah with ECMO. So we definitely want to give folks a fighting chance. And some would argue that in cold, fresh water, up to 90 minutes is reasonable. However, keep in mind that an anoxic brain that's been anoxic for 15 or 20 minutes is still an anoxic brain. So we're going to work hard in those initial minutes to try to effect a rescue if possible. We want to establish isolation zones. The hot zone is in the water hazard. The warm zone is within 10. Some people might suggest 15 feet of the water's edge. But in that warm zone, you must have at least a PFD available. We don't wear structural firefighting turnouts near swift water, of course. And then the cold zone is the staging area outside of the warm zone where command and additional resources are staged to receive our victim. So some considerations, sort of some fun facts to help keep in mind when you're deciding how far downstream you're going to place a spotter or how much help you need. A person can be swept away in just 6 inches of water. So again, ankle deep water at 3 miles per hour can take a human off their feet. A car can float away in just 24 inches of water. At 1 knot, or about that 1.2 miles per hour, an object can travel 100 feet in 1 minute. At 5 knots, or what would be a kind of a jog run, an object can travel 100 feet in just 12 seconds. And if you have to run or sprint to keep up with the speed of the water at 10 knots, that object can travel 100 feet every 60 seconds to help you decide how far downstream, using your maps, you should assign downstream spotters. And again, if we want to talk about the forces that water place on a human body at 6 miles per hour, that body is pinned by about a 140-pound wrestler. At 9 miles per hour, that'd be like being pinned by a 300-pound wrestler. So some of these forces are much stronger, especially if the person is injured, elderly, young, or cold. that can be a lot of force to have to fight against. So tactics to consider. Active search versus passive search is going to be decided based on your PLS and your witness interview. An active search is where water rescue will enter the water, we will actively search for this person, we will search that PLS or downstream calculations, whereas a passive search would be maybe fresh tracks in the mud, clothing or shoes, an overturned and unattended watercraft, where we are now going to search from the bank, possibly from a watercraft in a wide area search, but we are going to passively search that entire area while our law enforcement officers are doing the best they can to locate any missing individuals. And then we use the yo, reach, throw, row, go methodology, and I've color-coded that sort of cold zone, warm zone, hot zone, or you might say awareness to ops-ish to definitely technician level activities. So yo would be where we holler out to the person, we give them instructions, we tell them to grab onto something, we tell them to wade, we tell them to walk, we tell them to move or to keep their feet upstream, or rather downstream, or we can advance to reaching, a ground ladder, a pipe pole, some Forest Service hose, rope line, whatever we can have them reach for to help stabilize themselves. And then throw, where we're deploying lines, tossing them out to them, throw bags, or the regular ropes that we have on frontline apparatus. And then row is where we're in a watercraft and we're moving to them, and go is where we have a rescue swimmer in the water swimming to the victim. Those last two, again, reserved for technician level and equipped responders only. When we're talking about a river, it's important that we have common terminology. So we describe a river bank's direction, or river's direction and its banks, always by facing downstream. So when looking downstream, river left is always river left, river right is always river right, based on the river's downstream flow. So what do you get when you call Company 7? Well, we aren't NIMS typed, but we're roughly equal to a NIMS Type 3 team, meaning we're capable of launching a complement of people into the water for offensive search. We can provide decontamination and recovery from those incidents after they are wrapped up. We have water rescue specific equipment for reaching, like the ability to inflate fire hose, or throw flotation, or swim to the person and deliver flotation or rescue implements to them with our litters and Carlson boards. We have 3 watercraft, one that's trailered and motorized, one that is transported on the truck, always inflated and is still very portable, and then our very portable rapid deployment craft, which can be inflated in less than 60 seconds, carried to a scene and deployed for ice, mud, water. That's our RDC, and a very handy watercraft. We have additional PPE, so we can outfit additional firefighters with throw bags and PFDs. And then we have some limited rope systems that we work with under the guidance of Heavy Rescue, and we would, of course, call our Heavy Rescue team for additional resources there. So we're going to move on to Sugar House Park, where we're going to do some skills demonstrations. We're going to practice throwing some lines with accuracy based on the following scenario. An adult male has chased their dog into Parley's Creek at Sugar House Park near the East Loop basketball courts. The person has a foot entrapment, maybe on some branches or boulders, with a lower leg fracture in swift water and cannot move from the water. Their dog self-rescued, and you are the crew of Medic Engine 3 responding to this first due. So, some of the skills that we want to make sure that we know well. Ferry angles are when we're using a throw bag or line with the victim, or when we unfortunately have to end up defensive swimming to exit the water. We use a ferry angle to the current of the water to be pushed to a shore. So if we keep our feet high and downstream, which is the only safe way to defensively swim, if we angle our body to the current, the swimmer is pushed in the direction of their head. So keep ferry angling in mind, and we'll demonstrate that. We're also going to use the Rescue Y, which is a modified 2-line system in this configuration, based on one line with a figure 8 on a bight tied on the terminal end of one line, and then another line simply passed through it. And we're going to show you some skills with that. So modified rescue wire, or a capturing stabilization line. Remember, flotation and stabilization are key components of initial response. We're going to follow these steps. First due injured truck dons their PFDs and delivers 1 rope bag to the near shore and 1 rope bag to the far shore. The far shore rescuer, step 2, ensures that a figure 8 on a bight is tied at the end of their rope. And then step 3, the far shore rope with the figure 8 is then accordion folded, not coiled, just like a flat load of hose, and is thrown in a big overhand high arc to the near shore team. The near shore team at step 4 tensions that line and provides initial stabilization to the victim using a body wrap and staying about 10 feet from the water's edge, but still with PFDs, and gives that victim something to grab onto if they have nothing else. The near shore team then passes a length of their rope through the bight of that figure 8 that they've just received. We recommend whatever the width of the water is times about 3 for the amount of line that you are going to advance through that bight. You've now formed a Y at step 6 by creating a vector in the near shore's rope. Step 7, that Y is then passed back to the victim very quickly with the knot just passing his head, and the vector line is placed in the armpits of the victim. Step 8, the near shore rescuers are now going to switch positions, pull the old switcheroo, with the eventual upstream rescuer passing under the other section of line. So think you. The upstream person goes under. So in step 9, the victim is now pinched in the Y as the near shore rescuers spread apart and all lines are tensioned. So now we've got a hold of that person, they've got stabilization that they can grab onto, and we want to make sure that we stick to the creed of once we capture somebody, we don't lose them. Step 10, the victim is stabilized and captured. So what can we do with this? Well, it's a stabilization line, if nothing else. If the victim is cooperative and able to do so, they can now hang tight for water rescue to arrive, enter the water, disentangle their extremity, and get them loaded and out of the water. In the event that the victim falls or is broken free by the stabilization line or is able to fish their extremity out and become free, that person will likely fall into the water, or can at least be assisted in wading or walking if possible. But if they do fall in the water, they can now be ferried to the near shore through coordination of the line tenders at the direction of the company officer or the upstream line tender. We can ferry the person by allowing the current to swing the victim to shore by pivoting on the upstream rescuer's line, while very slowly offering a little bit of slack in the other 2 sections of line, as demonstrated here. So we have our victim stuck in the middle of Parley's Creek with a foot entrapment and fracture. They're unable to move. They're getting cold. They've got a 140-pound wrestler trying to pin them into the water, plus a great deal of pain. They're likely to become less and less capable of rescuing themselves. So we've coiled that figure 8 from the far shore, thrown it to the near shore where we're going to receive the victim, and we're passing about 30 feet, 40, 50 feet of line through that figure 8, and now we're going to pull that figure 8 knot with the newly vector line back past the victim's head. So as the knot passes their head, we're going to instruct them to get that V into their armpits, and now we pull the switcheroo where the upstream rescuer goes under, and we've now captured our person. As those near shore rescuers spread apart, they can even have more control over the person. And now we coordinate together. Oh, our victim broke free and is now in the current, so we're just going to ferry them over. The upstream person is going to keep tension as the other 2 offer just a little bit of slack, controlling the movements based on company officer or upstream rescuer instructions. We can get that person right to the shore, just like we would do with a throwback. So in conclusion, remember, water rescue is extremely hazardous. It is the last ideal H environment where we have to hold our breath or fight to breathe. So training and PPE are key to responder safety. Respect the isolation zones. And for additional questions or training, contact your platoon's water rescue crew. Stay safe, and let's go train at the park.